Wargamers, today I want to talk about a 2,000 point ITC style Tau list that I played in a tournament over the weekend, how it did, things I liked, things I didn't, and how it would change. Before I do that though, I want to say thanks for watching. If you like this video, go ahead and hit the like button and the subscribe button, that way you don't miss any of my upcoming 8th edition content. Alright, so here's my 2,000 point list. It consists of a single battalion detachment, and yes, there was not a painting requirement, so a couple of these guys are missing some paint, but for the most part it is painted and WYSIWYG. So first off, we have Farsight here. He's in the HQ slot, as well as Darkstrider. Now keep in mind those guys have different Sept keywords, so I had to change a few things over here to be Tau Sept, but otherwise everything is Farsight Enclave Sept keyword. Alright, so that's my HQ. In my troops I have 2 units of Fire Warriors, strike teams, 5-man. One of them has a Shas'vre with a Markerlight. And then I also have a Breacher team, full size, and they're accompanied by a Devilfish. In fast attack I have a unit of 6 Pathfinders and 2 Yvaras. Yeah, that's the fast attack. Each Yvara is equipped with a stimulant injector and target lock. And then in my elite section I have a unit of 5 crisis suits. Each have 2 plasma rifles and a flamer. They're accompanied by 5 gun drones and 2 shield drones. And then also in my elite slot I have a unit of 6 stealth suits. No special upgrades or anything like that, just 2 marker drones. But yeah, that's the 2,000 point list. Now I know that I said originally that I was going to film deployment, give you a little bit more of a on the ground perspective of how the tournament went, and that was my plan. But I showed up to the tournament and there's a few things working against me. Some people didn't really want to do the whole camera thing, and there were a lot of proxies and unpainted models, things like that. So it didn't seem like a thing worthwhile to pursue. And in addition to that, one of my 2 Yvaras broke during my first game, and I don't mean just like a little break. I mean like it broke off at the ankles, and then my opponent accidentally nudged it and broke the arm off, and it was just in shambles. So yeah, it just wasn't going to be something very good to look at. So instead we're just going to kind of talk about how it performed, and piece by piece kind of what things went well and what didn't. So my first match was the Relic, so using the standard combined arms format missions for ITC, we played the Relic, and I played against the only other Tau player there. He had a list that focused around having a 1 Yvara, 1 Arvarna, 3 Ghost Kills, and then Commander Orelai, a Cold Star Commander, and some Hazard suits. So that was the gist of his 2,000 point list, and so you can see he kind of took a more suit-based approach, and I took a more infantry-based approach. And when we're playing the Relic, having infantry is really important. So I did win that game. Things that worked out well for me, basically my Yvaras, they were surprisingly resilient, and that's kind of a theme throughout the tournament, is they stuck around a lot longer than most people thought they would, myself included. They generally would get brought down to like a handful of wounds and then just kind of stay there for a little bit, and then finally either bite the dust or stay at that for the rest of the game. So Yvar's very resilient. I was able to basically move upfield and flamer everything. Yvaras versus Ghost Kills is kind of a one-sided matchup, just because Ghost Kills rely on the -2 penalty to hit, where Yvaras completely circumvent that with the flamer. So that was a tabling game. I tabled my opponent and progressed on to the next round, which was Big Guns Never Tire. I played against an opponent who built a list to showcase why Forge World should be limited in a competitive setting. So this was meant to be a super cheesy list, just brought for that main idea. It was an Elder list, a Ynnari list actually, and it contained at least a dozen units, or maybe at least 9 units of Shadow Specters. I don't know exactly how many it was. It was a lot of 3-man units of Shadow Specters, which, if you're unfamiliar with them, are a Forge World unit that have -1 to hit, and then they have these really nasty guns that are basically multi-damage plasma guns. And yeah, so we deployed. He had all these Shadow Specters and a Warlock that cast Conceal, so they were -2 to hit. Very difficult to deal with. The Yvaras would be able to do a little bit against that, but against MSU -2 to hit units, you're only going to be able to take out a single unit with a Yvara Flamer, right? So you're not going to be able to take out multiple units per turn with a single Flamer, and that's a big weakness of my list against that opponent. He also was able to use the Shadow Specters in conjunction with a unit of like 10 Dark Reapers to take out one of my Yvaras right away before I even got to roll any dice. So I started off in a pretty rough place. The list as a whole actually functioned fairly well. I ended up tabled that game. So first game I tabled my opponent, and it came right around the other way and smacked me in the butt the second game where I got tabled. But I started off losing that Yvara right off the bat, and the rest of the list performed relatively well. I did a lot more damage than I thought I was. I thought, maybe I would make it to the end of turn 2, but I think I made it at least to turn 4 or 5, so that was good. And yeah, it worked really well. The Breachers did a really nice job taking out Yvraine and the Yinkarn, so they took out the 2 HQ units. The Crisis Suits did a fantastic job dropping in, offering some support to the remaining Yvara, and having the Flamers on those Crisis Suits made a big difference in dwindling down the number of Shadow Specters. So I really do think Flamers are a great option for Crisis Suits, specifically for this reason. They're good at getting down and dirty with enemy infantry, especially if they have a modifier to hit, which is going to be increasingly common given the chapter tactics and faction special rules that we've been seeing with things like Raven Guard and various Death Guard factions. Seems like everybody has a -1 to hit faction that they can choose, and so Flamers, great way to get around that. Things that didn't really do anything that game, basically my 5-man units of Fire Warriors, or my strike teams, really didn't pull any weight here or in any of my other games. They do have some durability, but for the most part, just not really doing a whole lot. So that was a loss, and I think, like I said, I think the list performed well considering the first turn, but it still just totally got stopped by that list. The third game that I played was Secure and Control, or Roll Dice and Tie, and that was against a Sisters list that took both a detachment of Sisters of Battle and a detachment of Raptors, Space Marine Raptors faction from Forge World. And so that list included a lot of Battle Sisters with Meltaguns. I don't know exactly how many Meltaguns. Let's see, 4 times, like, at least like 15 Meltaguns, and then Celestine, of course, and then it had the Forge World Raptor special character, and then like 3 different Devastator detachments as well. And this list was able to, and of course the most important part, it had the Sisters of Battle Repressors. So all these Battle Sisters were mounted in Repressors, which have firing points, meaning that I had to pop all these tanks before I could get at the gooey goodness inside and do anything with these infantry. So this list rolled up on me right away. He seized the initiative, which was really not awesome for me. Seized the initiative, rolled up on me, threw a ton of Melta at my Yvaras, and actually rolled real poorly, and I rolled real well, and he only was able to take a few wounds off of one of my Yvaras. And so with 2 Yvaras, I was able to pop a couple of those transports, kill a few units, but in the end of the day, it was just too much firepower for me. I was able to maneuver myself in a way that did claim me some points at the end of the game. My opponent actually was a little confused on the end game objectives, and so he thought he was going to win primary, but I actually kind of weaseled my way into gaining some points there. I don't mean that in a negative way, but I was able to claim the objectives that mattered, and he was on objectives that didn't matter, so it worked out in my favor in that game, but really doesn't say anything about the list as a whole, so take that for what it's worth. It was more of just, you know, paying attention to the mission. So yeah, that was that. I didn't get tabled, but at the end of the game, I only had 1 Yvara left. Everything else got taken out. Darkstrider and the Breachers were trying real hard to do something with Celestine and another bunch of transports. They didn't do anything at all, and really just ended up dying very quickly. So overall, I went 1 and 2. I think the list performed okay in this environment given the list that I went up against. The first list that had a moderate amount of Forge World in it, that was Tau, it performed very well. But against the second 2 lists that were very Forge World dependent, had a lot of really competitive components to them, and also were fielded by very competitive players. Both players that I played in my second and third games, very well-respected players, both locally and also nationally. So yeah, so my opponents were very competitive, and so I'm not ashamed to say that I got my butt handed to me by these guys. But I think in a different construction meta or a different construction rule set, the list would have performed much better. You know, I only had the 2 Forge World units in there, the 2 Yvaras, and something that we're seeing with Renegade, the Renegade Open in a few weeks here, or a month or so here, is that they're limiting Forge World to be 0-1. So that means only 1 Yvara, but it also means that there's only going to be 1 Repressor, only 1 unit of Shadow Specters, 1 Malefic Lord, you know, things like that. So that makes the Yvara, I think, a lot more viable in a competitive standpoint. I think a similar list to this would work very well in that meta, and that's what I'm using as my launching point going forward. So I'll keep you guys up to date on what that next iteration of the list will look like. Obviously, because of the 0-1 restriction on Yvaras, I'm going to switch that out for our Varna. So it will look a little bit more like my opponent's list from game 1, but I think that list will do better compared to other lists that are built in that same construction rule set. Overall, I like what the Crisis Suits were able to do. Plasma rifles, they did some work, but maybe fusion blasters are going to be a better option there. Lean a little bit more into flamers. Stealth Suits did a really nice job. Really, the things that pulled their weight were all the battle suits. The things that didn't pull their weight, Farsight himself, he didn't. I really didn't use him at all. He did a little bit of work in my second game, just dropping in the backfield and killing some backliners, but otherwise he really didn't do anything at all. I didn't even get a chance to use his Master of or Lord of War ability. So yeah, really not a competitive choice on my part there. And then all my infantry really just, you know, didn't offer much to the list. So they were able to sit on some objectives, but again, I think that minimizing my reliance on them, or either, you know, I guess I was kind of straddling the fence on the infantry. I had a few, but I didn't have a ton, so I think if I were going to go infantry, I would lean much more heavily into infantry, or otherwise try to minimize their component as much as possible. And that's where I'm going to go with the list moving forward. So I look forward to showing you guys what that list looks like in my next iteration, and you know, let me know what you think in the comments below. Let me know. You can see the list, of course, in the description, and yeah, let me know what you think about its construction. You can use it, of course, you know, give me constructive feedback or whatever. So, all right, that's it. Rambled enough. That's how the tournament went. Thanks for watching, and of course, happy wargaming.